You think survival food means canned goods and freeze-dried packets? Think again. Our grandparents kept families alive through depressions, wars, and hard winters with recipes born from pure ingenuity and determination. Let's dig into 60 old-school survival recipes no one seems to make anymore. Crescent veggie wreath was a festive appetizer that took advantage of the flexible nature of crescent dough. The dough was arranged in a circular pattern, baked into a ring, then topped with a spread of cream cheese and fresh vegetables to resemble a holiday wreath. It was colorful, eye-catching, and a lighter option compared to many heavier dishes on buffet tables. This recipe reflected how mid-century entertaining leaned on creativity and presentation just as much as taste. Families enjoyed making it together during the holidays because decorating the wreath with peppers, carrots, or broccoli felt playful. It became a centerpiece dish that was as much about bringing cheer as feeding guests. Betty Crocker cookbooks encouraged recipes like this because they combined practicality with charm, giving homemakers confidence that their party tables would impress. Even those who did not celebrate holidays in a traditional sense found reasons to make it for potlucks or seasonal events. It turned something as simple as dough and vegetables into a conversation starter. Tomato aspic salad was a staple of mid-century dinner tables, known for its eye-catching molded presentation and refreshing flavor. This retro dish featured a clear gelatin base that held vibrant slices of fresh tomatoes and often included other vegetables or herbs for added texture and color. It was prized for how quickly it could be assembled, usually requiring just a few simple ingredients and some time to chill. The aspic's firm yet delicate texture made it a contrast to typical leafy salads, offering a unique way to serve vegetables during gatherings or holiday meals. It fit perfectly into the era's fascination with molded foods, where gelatin was used to showcase ingredients in an elegant form. Despite its simplicity, the tomato aspic salad brought sophistication to the table and was often served as a first course or side dish. Its popularity reflected a desire for visually appealing, easy-to-make dishes that required minimal cooking effort. The salad's refreshing qualities made it especially welcome during warmer months, offering a light and cool complement to heartier fare. Tomato aspic remains a nostalgic example of vintage American culinary creativity. Celery Victor was a dish that proved even a humble vegetable like celery could be dressed up into something special. This recipe called for cooking celery stalks until just tender, then marinating them quickly in a vinaigrette of oil, vinegar, and herbs. Once chilled, the celery was served as a salad, often on lettuce leaves or with slices of hard-boiled egg for garnish. Old cookbooks promoted it as a sophisticated option, despite its modest ingredients, and it was sometimes featured in restaurants before making its way into home kitchens. Families appreciated how quickly it came together and how it made use of a vegetable that was often overlooked. Celery Victor was light, refreshing, and inexpensive, which made it perfect for luncheons, picnics, or summer suppers. It was the kind of recipe that elevated the ordinary with just a few simple steps. Though celery rarely takes center stage, this dish gave it a moment to shine in a thrifty and flavorful way. Cornbread and sausage dressing was a savory and hearty dish made by combining crumbled cornbread with seasoned sausage, herbs, and broth to create a moist, flavorful stuffing. This classic recipe was a staple at family gatherings and holiday meals, especially during Thanksgiving, reflecting the resourceful use of staple Southern ingredients. The cornbread provided a crumbly, slightly sweet base, while the sausage added richness and spice, making the dish both comforting and satisfying. Dressing was often baked in a casserole dish until the top was golden and slightly crisp, contrasting with the soft interior. This recipe showcased how simple pantry ingredients could be transformed into a centerpiece dish that brought families together. It was prized for its ability to stretch a meal, feeding many at a low cost. The tradition of cornbread and sausage dressing highlights the creativity and depth of African American culinary heritage, blending flavors that are both rustic and refined. It remains a beloved comfort food that evokes memories of home-cooked meals and communal celebrations. Campbell's Carnival Pie was a recipe that shows just how far mid-century kitchens were willing to experiment with sweet and savory combinations. The dish combined tomato soup with pineapple chunks, a flaky crust, and a scattering of spices to create what was described as festive food. The pie was promoted in advertising campaigns as something new and exciting for family gatherings or themed parties. It was sweet, tangy, and savory all at once, though not everyone was ready to embrace that flavor clash. The pineapple added brightness, the soup added depth, and the crust held it all together. Mothers often baked it for children's birthdays, leaning into the carnival theme as if the name alone would sell it. But while the pie may have looked cheerful, most tasters considered it confusing more than delicious. It quietly vanished from later editions of Campbell's cookbooks, remembered only by those who dared to serve it at a party. Still, it reflects the playful spirit of vanished American recipes. Velveeta and tomato soup dip was a dish that embodied the comfort and convenience of mid-century American entertaining. By melting processed Velveeta cheese into canned tomato soup, homemakers created a quick, warm dip that could be served with crackers or breadsticks in minutes. It was a crowd pleaser at card nights, community gatherings, and holiday parties, offering something both creamy and tangy without much effort. Velveeta's smooth melting quality made it ideal for dips, while the tomato soup added a savory base that stretched the cheese further. Guests often gathered around bowls of this dip, scooping up bites while chatting, making it as much a social dish as a culinary one. For many families, it was a go-to recipe because it required no special skill and relied entirely on inexpensive pantry staples. While today's party spreads may lean more gourmet, Velveeta and tomato soup dip was once a symbol of hospitality and the ease of mid-century entertaining. Apple pie crescent turnovers were a clever shortcut dessert that let homemakers mimic the flavor of a freshly baked pie without the hours of effort. Instead of rolling out crust from scratch, canned crescent dough provided a flaky shell for a quick filling of apples, cinnamon, and sugar. The turnovers baked up golden, bubbling slightly at the seams, and filled the house with the unmistakable scent of apple pie. They were smaller and simpler than a traditional pie, making them ideal for everyday family desserts or after-school treats. This was the kind of recipe that mothers could whip up on short notice when children begged for something sweet. It was thrifty too, since canned apple pie filling worked just as well as fresh apples, which saved time and money. Betty Crocker's endorsement made it feel like a trustworthy option, especially for less confident bakers. With every bite, the warm apple filling and flaky crust offered comfort that felt homemade, even if the shortcut was right there in plain sight. Baked macaroni and cheese cups were an innovative take on a beloved comfort food, offering individual portions that cooked quickly and were perfect for family meals. These cups involved preparing traditional macaroni and cheese, then portioning it into muffin tins or ramekins before baking until golden and bubbly on top. This method allowed for convenient serving sizes and faster cooking times compared to larger casseroles. Baked macaroni and cheese cups appealed to mid-century families for their simplicity and ability to please both children and adults. The recipe made use of familiar ingredients like elbow macaroni, cheddar cheese, and milk, combining them into a portable, visually appealing form. It reflected the era's growing interest in convenience and portion control without sacrificing the creamy richness of classic mac and cheese. This dish continues to evoke warm memories of home-cooked meals and innovative twists on traditional recipes. Mock apple pie with crackers was one of the most clever Depression-era tricks to ever appear in print. When apples were scarce or expensive, cooks would take soda crackers, sugar, water, cinnamon, and lemon juice to recreate the flavor and texture of apple filling. The crackers softened in the syrupy mixture and remarkably resembled tender apple slices once baked. Covered with a simple pie crust, the result looked and tasted enough like real apple pie that many guests never suspected the difference. Best of all, it could be made in about 10 minutes of active work, since the filling came together on the stovetop in no time. Cookbooks praised it as a marvel of resourcefulness, and it became a household favorite during times when true fruit pies were out of reach. Few recipes show the ingenuity of old cookbooks better than this one. Pickled watermelon rind was a historic Southern delicacy that used preserved watermelon rinds pickled with vinegar, sugar, and spices to create a crunchy, tangy treat. This inventive recipe transformed what was once considered waste into a flavorful snack or condiment. Pickling extended the shelf life of the rind and added layers of sweet and sour flavor, often enhanced with cinnamon sticks, cloves, or peppercorns. The dish showcased ingenuity in preservation methods, especially important before refrigeration was widespread. It was commonly served alongside savory dishes or enjoyed as a sweet and tangy accompaniment during meals. Pickled watermelon rind reflected the resourceful spirit of African American kitchens, where nothing edible was wasted. Its unique texture and flavor made it a memorable part of traditional Southern cuisine. Though less common today, this delicacy offers a fascinating glimpse into culinary history and preservation techniques. A soup can omelet was a recipe that showed just how far mid-century cooks would stretch a single egg. The method was simple. Beat eggs, stir in half a can of cream soup, and cook it like a custardy omelet. The soup acted as filler, giving the illusion of more eggs while also adding a creamy texture. It often used cream of mushroom, cream of chicken, or cream of celery, depending on what was available. The result was a heavy, rich omelet that was more casserole than breakfast plate. Families embraced it because eggs could be scarce or expensive, and soup was cheap and plentiful. It was also versatile enough to throw in leftover vegetables or bits of meat. Despite its practicality, the soup can omelet never quite earned lasting affection because it was too dense and bland compared to a normal omelet. By the 1970s, it had mostly disappeared from cookbooks, surviving only as a quirky food memory. Cottage cheese with pineapple rings was a simple yet elegant dish that appeared in countless mid-century cookbooks as both a side and a light lunch. A scoop of cottage cheese was often served on a bed of lettuce, topped with a canned pineapple ring, and finished with a bright red maraschino cherry. This dish looked cheerful, was inexpensive, and struck a balance between sweet and savory flavors. It became a staple of lunch counters, school cafeterias, and family dinner tables because it was filling yet refreshing. Housewives appreciated it because it required little effort but felt polished enough for guests. For children, the bright cherry and juicy pineapple made it appealing, even if cottage cheese was not always a favorite. This recipe exemplifies how presentation mattered as much as taste, turning simple ingredients into something that felt special. Though it has largely vanished from modern kitchens, it stands as a reminder of a playful, colorful era of American food. Crescent roll hot dog wraps were the kind of fun, quick trick that could turn an ordinary package of Franks into something kids begged for again and again. Instead of simply boiling or frying hot dogs, home cooks wrapped each one in buttery crescent dough and baked them until golden. The scent that filled the kitchen was unmistakable, a mix of toasted bread and sizzling hot dog, and it felt like a celebration even on a weeknight. These little rolls were perfect for lunchboxes, after-school snacks, or birthday parties, and they looked more impressive than the small effort it took to make them. Parents loved how fast they came together and how reliable the recipe was, while kids were thrilled at the novelty of having their favorite food wrapped up like a gift. This was the kind of Betty Crocker idea that spread quickly through kitchens across America because it required little more than a can of dough and a package of Franks. Even today, the memory of biting into that flaky crust with a hot dog inside can take people right back to childhood. Mock crab salad offered an economical seafood alternative popular during wartime when fresh ingredients were scarce and expensive. Using imitation crab meat, typically made from processed white fish, home cooks could create a creamy, flavorful salad that resembled crab salad without the high cost. This recipe was particularly valued for its affordability and ease of preparation, requiring few ingredients beyond the imitation crab, mayonnaise, celery, and seasonings. Mock crab salad fit into the era's resourcefulness mindset, allowing families to enjoy familiar flavors despite rationing and shortages. It was versatile enough to be served on sandwiches, crackers, or as a standalone salad, making it a practical choice for lunches and light dinners. The dish reflected how cooks creatively substituted ingredients to maintain variety and nutrition in their meals. Mock crab salad stands as a testament to the ingenuity and adaptability of mid-century American cooking during challenging times. Banana and sour cream salad might sound unusual today, but in the middle of the 20th century, it was a prized quick dish that often doubled as dessert. Cookbooks called for nothing more than slicing ripe bananas, layering them neatly on a plate, covering them with sour cream, and sprinkling the top with a dusting of sugar. In less than 10 minutes, you had a salad that was creamy, tangy, and sweet all at once. Housewives appreciated how it used just 3 ingredients, yet looked elegant enough for luncheons or church gatherings. Children enjoyed the sweetness, while adults saw it as a lighter alternative to heavier pies or cakes. What made it endure was how easy it was to scale. A single banana could serve one person, or several could fill a platter. It was also one of those recipes that made use of fruit before it spoiled, which was essential in thrifty kitchens. Molasses glazed ham combined the sweet, robust flavor of molasses with savory ham to create an economical yet indulgent dish common in mid-century Southern kitchens. This recipe made use of affordable ham cuts, often shoulder or picnic hams, which were slow-cooked and then brushed generously with a sticky molasses glaze. The glaze caramelized in the oven, infusing the meat with rich sweetness, balanced by a hint of saltiness. Molasses was a staple sweetener in African American households, valued for its deep flavor and affordability compared to refined sugar. The dish was a centerpiece at family gatherings and holiday meals, symbolizing both celebration and resourcefulness. Cooking ham with molasses allowed cooks to stretch ingredients while still producing a dish that felt special and satisfying. Though less common today, this recipe reflects a culinary heritage of making the most out of pantry staples while honoring flavor. Its lingering aroma and rich taste evoke memories of home kitchens filled with warmth and tradition. Soup-stuffed meat rings were a clever but unusual way to stretch ground beef into something that felt bigger than it really was. The recipe had you form beef into donut-shaped rings, spoon condensed soup into the center, and then bake until the whole thing set. Sometimes mashed potatoes were piped around the edges to make it look more appealing. Families loved the visual trick because it looked like a hearty centerpiece while really being very frugal. The soup filling usually doubled as both flavor and sauce, making each slice of meat ring taste like a full dinner. This was the kind of recipe that filled community cookbooks during the 1950s because it maximized every bit of meat while keeping costs down. Still, the odd shape and texture never made it a long-lasting favorite. As beef became more affordable and tastes shifted, the soup-stuffed meat ring quietly vanished from American kitchens. Tomato juice cocktail with celery salt was one of the simplest recipes found in old cookbooks, yet it carried an aura of sophistication in its time. Poured straight from the can into a glass, the tomato juice was seasoned with celery salt and sometimes a splash of lemon juice. It was often served as a refreshing starter before meals or as a mid-afternoon pick-me-up, believed to aid digestion and provide a boost of energy. In the 1950s and 60s, when vegetable juices were heavily marketed as health drinks, this cocktail was a fashionable choice for luncheons and dinner parties. Its bold flavor stood out from sweeter drinks, making it an acquired taste, but one that many adults grew to enjoy. The ease of preparation and minimal ingredients made it appealing for hosts who wanted something quick yet stylish. Though it has been overshadowed by modern beverages, tomato juice cocktail with celery salt once represented a time when even simple drinks carried a sense of ceremony. Crescent roll pizza pockets were a playful twist on Italian-American pizza that gained traction during the 1970s when families wanted fun, kid-friendly meals at home. By filling crescent dough with sauce, mozzarella, and small toppings like pepperoni or vegetables, home cooks could recreate the flavors of a pizzeria in bite-sized form. These little pockets baked quickly, making them perfect for weeknights or sleepovers when kids craved something exciting without waiting long. Parents appreciated that they could control portions and ingredients while still delivering the flavor children begged for. The ease of sealing and baking the dough meant even beginners could pull off the recipe without fear of failure. In many ways, they reflected the decade's fascination with convenience and creativity, where cookbooks encouraged playful riffs on classic dishes. They were portable, delicious, and endlessly customizable, which made them ideal for families balancing time and taste. Biting into one hot from the oven with melted cheese inside, was a memory that lingered long after. Baked potato skins with bacon bits provided a clever way to repurpose leftovers into a quick and savory snack during the 1960s. These potato skins used the hollowed-out shells of baked potatoes filled with crispy bacon pieces, cheese, and sometimes onions or herbs. The dish was easy to prepare and offered a flavorful filling option that minimized food waste. By using potato scraps and leftover bacon, home cooks could create a satisfying appetizer or side without requiring extra ingredients. This recipe fit perfectly into the era's growing trend of comfort foods that were both economical and tasty. Baked potato skins gained popularity for their ability to transform simple leftovers into something special, showcasing resourcefulness in the kitchen. The combination of crispy, salty bacon and creamy cheese made each bite indulgent yet approachable. This dish remains a nostalgic reminder of how families made the most out of every ingredient during mid-century America. Potato pancakes from Instant Mash proved that even convenience products could be reimagined into something homey and satisfying. Old cookbooks often suggested taking leftover mashed potatoes, or even instant ones prepared quickly, mixing them with an egg and a little flour, then frying them in a skillet until golden. In less than 10 minutes, you had crispy, comforting patties that worked for breakfast, lunch, or dinner. The beauty of this hack was how it turned something as simple as potato flakes into a versatile dish with real character. Families enjoyed topping them with sour cream, applesauce, or gravy, depending on what was available. For homemakers trying to save time while still offering variety, this recipe felt like a small victory. It proved that even shortcuts could deliver a dish that tasted just as good as traditional versions. Fried catfish nuggets were bite-sized pieces of catfish coated in seasoned cornmeal batter and deep-fried to crispy perfection. This dish was a popular snack or appetizer in Southern African American communities, prized for its crunchy exterior and tender, flaky fish inside. Catfish was abundant and affordable, making it an accessible protein source for many families. The seasoning blend often included paprika, garlic powder, and black pepper to give the nuggets a bold, savory flavor. Served with tartar sauce or hot sauce, these nuggets were a crowd pleaser at family dinners, church socials, and neighborhood gatherings. The recipe demonstrated skillful frying techniques passed down through generations, emphasizing texture and seasoning. Fried catfish nuggets captured the joy of communal eating and the love of simple, well-prepared ingredients. Today, they remain a beloved classic that highlights the rich seafood traditions of African American cooking. Soup gel. O-cubes were one of the most notorious experiments to come out of mid-century Campbell's recipe books. They combined unflavored gelatin with beef or vegetable consommé, creating firm cubes of savory jelly that could be served as salads or appetizers. The logic was that gelatin molds were fashionable and soup could be a shortcut to flavor. The result, however, was off-putting to most. They wobbled like a dessert, but tasted like cold broth, confusing the senses of anyone who tried them. Some versions added chopped vegetables or meats inside, which only made them stranger. These were heavily marketed as elegant buffet fare but never really caught on outside a handful of adventurous households. While gelatin salads with fruit or sweet fillings thrived, the savory soup versions quickly faded into obscurity. Today, soup gel O-cubes are often mentioned in lists of the oddest vintage foods, and for good reason. Egg and vinegar. Dressing salad was a straightforward recipe that brought together everyday staples in a tangy, filling way. Hard-boiled eggs were quickly chopped and mixed with vinegar, mayonnaise, and sometimes mustard, creating a creamy yet sharp dressing. This was spooned over lettuce, cabbage, or even bread, making it a versatile dish that could serve as either a salad or sandwich filling. It was quick to prepare, nutritious, and inexpensive, which made it especially appealing for families trying to stretch their groceries. The vinegar gave it a brightness that balanced the richness of the mayonnaise, while the eggs provided protein and substance. It often appeared in small-town cookbooks and homemaking guides, praised for being both practical and tasty. While it may sound simple, it reflected the mid-century love of efficient recipes that relied on pantry basics. Egg and vinegar dressing salad may have slipped out of style, but it remains a telling example of how thrift shaped everyday meals. Crescent-wrapped meatloaf slices were a creative twist on one of the most iconic thrifty meals of the mid-century. Meatloaf had long been a staple for families because it stretched ground beef with breadcrumbs, oats, and seasonings to feed many mouths cheaply. But by slicing it and wrapping each piece in crescent dough, homemakers gave the dish a new life that made leftovers feel exciting. What was once a plain loaf suddenly became individual golden parcels that looked intentional rather than recycled. These crescent-wrapped slices often appeared at potlucks, picnics, and family dinners, where presentation mattered as much as taste. The flaky crust helped keep the meat moist while adding a buttery texture that children especially loved. It was a practical way of disguising the repetition of a meal that otherwise might have felt uninspired. Betty Crocker cookbooks encouraged these kinds of reinventions, reminding homemakers that resourcefulness could still deliver joy. In many ways, this recipe was the perfect representation of mid-century cooking, thrifty, imaginative, and designed to bring smiles to the dinner table with little added cost or effort. Peach Melba Parfait was an easy-to-make dessert that layered peaches, raspberry sauce, and whipped cream to create a visually appealing and flavorful treat. This parfait celebrated fresh or canned peaches combined with the tartness of raspberry sauce, balanced by the richness of whipped cream or sometimes custard. Its preparation required minimal effort, often involving assembling the ingredients in glasses or bowls and chilling briefly before serving. Popular during the mid-20th century, the dessert reflected the era's love for elegant but uncomplicated sweets that could be enjoyed at home or social occasions. Peach Melba Parfait offered a refreshing contrast of flavors and textures, making it suitable for warmer seasons or as a light finish to a meal. The dish is named after a famed opera singer, adding a touch of sophistication to an otherwise straightforward recipe. This parfait remains a nostalgic favorite for those who remember its delicate balance of sweetness and tartness. Rice pudding stovetop shortcut was one of the most beloved examples of transforming leftovers into dessert without fuss. Instead of starting with raw rice and waiting for it to cook slowly, thrifty cooks simply reheated already cooked rice in a saucepan with milk sugar and a hint of vanilla or nutmeg. The heat thickened the mixture almost instantly, and within minutes you had a pudding that was creamy, warm, and comforting. This trick was praised in countless cookbooks because it turned scraps of rice from last night's supper into a sweet dish for today. Families enjoyed it hot or cold, and it could be stretched even further by adding raisins or cinnamon when available. It was especially popular in lean times when every grain of rice had to be used wisely. The stovetop version required no baking and almost no waiting, which made it perfect for busy homemakers. What might have otherwise gone to waste became a cherished treat, showing how resourcefulness could turn something simple into something delightful. Brown sugar-baked beans were a hearty side dish, featuring slow-cooked beans sweetened with brown sugar and seasoned with spices to create a rich, comforting flavor. This recipe was a common accompaniment at family gatherings, barbecues, and everyday meals, highlighting beans as a nutritious and affordable protein source. The beans were simmered gently with molasses or brown sugar, onions, and sometimes bacon or ham hocks for added depth. The sweetness balanced the earthiness of the beans, making the dish both filling and flavorful. Rooted in Southern cooking traditions, brown sugar-baked beans reflected the importance of beans in African American diets and the ingenuity in seasoning them with pantry staples. Cooking the beans low and slow allowed flavors to meld, producing a dish that could feed large families economically. This recipe also symbolized communal meals and celebrations, where food brought people together around the table. It remains a beloved comfort food with strong ties to cultural identity. Cheeseburger soup bake was one of those dishes that tried to bring the diner favorite into the oven without much fuss. It stacked layers of ground beef, tomato soup, pasta or biscuit dough, and melted cheese together until it resembled a lasagna gone American. The idea was that you could have the rich flavor of a cheeseburger in a single casserole dish, and mothers loved it because it fed a crowd while using only pantry staples. The soup added tang, the cheese added comfort, and the beef made it filling enough to pass for dinner even with smaller portions. Campbell's marketed it as a new family favorite, but in truth it was more of a novelty than a tradition. While children were often thrilled by the gooey layers, adults found it heavy and repetitive after a few tries. As frozen lasagna and frozen pizzas began filling freezers, the cheeseburger soup bake faded into the background. Still, it showed just how inventive cooks became with soup cans. Hot dog and Velveeta. Quesadillas were a quirky fusion snack that emerged from the growing popularity of processed foods and fast meals in the 1960s and 70s. Slices of hot dogs were placed inside flour tortillas with chunks of Velveeta cheese, then folded and fried until golden. The cheese melted into a gooey filling while the hot dogs provided a salty, smoky flavor that made the dish satisfying despite its simplicity. It was the kind of recipe that appealed especially to children, often served as an after-school snack or quick dinner. Parents liked it because it was cheap, used common pantry staples, and could be prepared in minutes without fuss. Though quesadillas were not traditionally part of American cooking at the time, this version showed how regional foods were adapted into playful, affordable meals. Today it might seem like a novelty, but hot dog and Velveeta quesadillas capture the creativity and humor of mid-century cooking, when making do often turned into something unexpectedly fun. Cheese-stuffed crescent triangles were an easy but satisfying dish that gave simple cheddar cheese a moment to shine. The dough was cut, folded, and sealed into small triangles with cubes or shreds of cheddar inside, then baked until the cheese melted into a gooey surprise. They were often served during family game nights, bridge clubs, or casual gatherings when people wanted a snack that felt warm and filling but did not require hours of work. The crispy edges, soft center, and melted cheese combined to create a bite that was both rich and comforting. These were versatile too, since cooks could use whatever cheese was on hand, from sharp cheddar to mild American, making them both economical and flexible. Betty Crocker cookbooks often suggested them as appetizers for entertaining, and once people tried them, they quickly became repeat favorites. There was something about pulling apart one of those golden triangles and watching the cheese stretch that felt indulgent even in the most modest setting. Sloppy Joe sliders captured the spirit of casual mid-century American dining with a miniature take on the iconic Sloppy Joe sandwich. These small-sized versions used seasoned ground beef cooked in a tangy tomato-based sauce, spooned onto mini buns or rolls. The sliders maintained all the messy, flavorful charm of the original dish while offering a bite-sized option suitable for parties or quick meals. Sloppy Joe sliders reflected the era's growing interest in convenience foods and finger foods that were easy to serve and share. They became popular in homes where families sought fun, informal dining experiences without spending hours preparing food. The recipe was praised for using inexpensive ingredients and stretching ground meat across multiple servings, making it budget-conscious. Its presence at gatherings and potlucks highlighted a sense of community and simple enjoyment. The sliders also represented a culinary evolution where traditional meals adapted to smaller, snack-friendly formats, showcasing mid-century creativity in the kitchen. Quick Grape Nuts custard was one of those recipes that transformed an everyday cereal into something that felt like a homemade dessert. The method was simple. Heat milk on the stove, stir in sugar, vanilla, and a handful of grape nuts, and let the mixture thicken as the cereal softened. The result was a warm, lightly textured custard that was ready in minutes and cost next to nothing. Many old cookbooks recommended it as an economical way to serve dessert for a family without needing eggs or cream in large amounts. The cereal gave body and nutty flavor, while the sugar and vanilla made it taste more indulgent than it truly was. Families enjoyed it both hot and chilled, and it became especially popular during the Depression when stretching every ingredient mattered. The dish proved that convenience foods like cereal could be adapted creatively into something entirely new. It was quick, practical, and comforting, making it a staple of many kitchens for years. Blackstrap molasses bread was a dense, nutrient-rich bread sweetened with robust blackstrap molasses, prized for its deep flavor and health benefits. This bread used whole grain flours combined with blackstrap molasses, which was valued not only for sweetness but also for its iron and mineral content. It was a practical staple during times when refined sugar was scarce or expensive, offering a wholesome alternative that added complexity to everyday meals. The bread's hearty texture made it filling and durable, perfect for breakfasts or as a side with soups and stews. Rooted in African-American culinary traditions, blackstrap molasses bread reflected a connection to natural ingredients and health-conscious cooking. Its rich, slightly bittersweet flavor profile made it unique among quick breads. The recipe honored both the nutritional and cultural significance of molasses, weaving history into every loaf. Today, it remains a beloved reminder of resourceful baking and soulful flavors from the past. Cream of chicken soufflé was Campbell's take on elevating canned soup into something resembling French cuisine. The recipe called for cream of chicken soup whipped into eggs and milk, then baked until puffed and airy. It promised sophistication without the fuss, making it seem like any housewife could serve gourmet foods straight from the oven. In reality, the result was often heavy and more casserole than soufflé, but it still gave families a sense of occasion. The dish was frequently suggested for Sunday dinners or holiday meals when people wanted something beyond ordinary casseroles. Its light, golden crust made it look impressive, even if the texture was denser than true soufflé. Campbell's heavily advertised it in promotional pamphlets during the 1950s, but by the 1970s, it had largely vanished. The rise of actual French cooking techniques and better access to ingredients made the shortcut version obsolete. Still, cream of chicken soufflé remains a vanished marker of aspiration in the cookbook era. Quick rice pudding with condensed milk was a thrifty way to turn leftover rice into a sweet and comforting dessert. By mixing cooked rice with sweetened condensed milk, raisins, and a sprinkle of cinnamon, homemakers could produce something warm and filling in only minutes. This dish was particularly popular in households that valued frugality, as it repurposed what might have otherwise gone to waste. The condensed milk gave the pudding a rich creaminess, while the raisins added chewy bursts of sweetness. Some cooks served it warm straight from the pan, while others chilled it for a firmer custard-like texture. Children often loved it for its simple sweetness, while adults enjoyed it as a quick treat that required no complicated baking. Its popularity stemmed not from elegance, but from its reliability and ease, especially in busy households where convenience was key. Though rice pudding has many variations across cultures, this condensed milk version is remembered as an American shortcut that spoke to both resourcefulness and comfort. Ham and pickle crescent spirals were the kind of potluck staple that turned ordinary ingredients into something eye-catching and tasty. Thin slices of ham and crisp dill pickles were layered inside crescent dough, rolled tightly, and sliced into small pinwheels before baking. The result was a salty, tangy, and buttery snack that was as fun to look at as it was to eat. These spirals fit right into the tradition of church suppers, community gatherings, and holiday buffets where trays of bite-sized foods were passed around for everyone to share. The flavor was unexpected, but surprisingly balanced, with the sharp pickle cutting through the richness of the ham and dough. Many people first encountered them at a party, then went home eager to try making them themselves because of how simple they were. Betty Crocker promoted recipes like these because they stretched small amounts of ingredients into large servings, which was always appealing to thrifty households. They became one of those quietly memorable foods people remembered decades later with a smile. Open-faced hot turkey sandwiches became a post-war staple that brought both speed and comfort to the dinner table. These sandwiches used leftover turkey smothered in rich gravy, served open-faced on a slice of bread, allowing the warm sauce to soak into every bite. The dish reflected the era's practical approach to meals, emphasizing making the most out of leftovers while satisfying hungry families quickly. It was common to see this on weekday dinners when time was short, but a hearty meal was still needed. The gravy often came from pan drippings, adding flavor without requiring extra ingredients, which made this recipe especially valuable during times of rationing or tight budgets. People appreciated that this dish did not require long preparation or fancy skills, making it accessible for cooks of all levels. It also brought a nostalgic connection to holiday meals while fitting the busy pace of post-war life. For many families, it was a quick way to recreate the warmth of a Sunday roast without spending hours in the kitchen. The open-faced turkey sandwich is a perfect example of how simplicity and flavor met in the American home kitchen of the mid-20th century. Oatmeal. Griddle cakes were born from the idea that nothing should go to waste, not even the cold pot of oatmeal left from breakfast. Cookbooks encouraged thrifty cooks to stir in a little flour, baking powder, and milk to form a thick batter that could be spooned onto a hot griddle. Within minutes, you had hearty cakes with a crisp outside and a tender inside. The beauty of this recipe was that it disguised leftovers as something entirely new. Families often topped them with syrup, molasses, or a pat of butter, and suddenly yesterday's porridge became today's satisfying lunch. These cakes were not only quick, but also surprisingly filling, which made them especially appealing during leaner times. For housewives looking to stretch every penny, turning scraps into something warm and comforting was not just resourceful, it was rewarding. This recipe captured that spirit perfectly. Sweet potato and black-eyed pea salad was a refreshing cold dish that combined two classic Southern staples tossed in a tangy, flavorful dressing. This salad celebrated the natural sweetness of roasted or boiled sweet potatoes paired with the earthy taste and firm texture of black-eyed peas. Often enhanced with chopped onions, bell peppers, and herbs, the dish balanced hearty ingredients with bright acidity from vinegar or citrus-based dressings. It was a practical yet delicious way to enjoy familiar ingredients in a new form, often served during warmer months or at potlucks. Rooted in African-American culinary traditions, this salad reflected the blending of nutrition and flavor, honoring the cultural importance of both sweet potatoes and black-eyed peas. Its vibrant colors and textures made it a favorite side dish, symbolizing community gatherings and family meals. The recipe offers a fresh take on heritage foods while maintaining deep ties to the past. Eggplant mushroom towers were Campbell's answer to the growing mid-century fascination with vegetable-based dishes that looked fancy without costing much. The recipe called for eggplant slices layered with cream of mushroom soup and breadcrumbs stacked neatly into small towers and then baked until tender. They were pitched as an elegant side dish, something that would impress dinner guests while still being practical for home cooks. The mushroom soup added creamy richness, the breadcrumbs added crunch, and the eggplant gave it body. It was visually striking on a plate, especially when paired with other colorful vegetables. But despite the clever presentation, the recipe never became a household staple. The heavy soup overwhelmed the delicate eggplant, and many home cooks preferred frying or grilling eggplant instead. Eggplant mushroom towers vanished from print by the 1970s, remembered as one of those recipes that looked better in the cookbook photo than on the actual dinner table. Peanut butter and lettuce sandwich might sound strange today, but it was once a familiar part of thrifty American kitchens. Born out of Depression-era resourcefulness, it lingered in mid-century cookbooks because it was affordable, nutritious, and surprisingly refreshing. A thick layer of peanut butter spread over bread was topped with crisp lettuce, creating a mix of creamy and crunchy textures. The combination of savory nuttiness with the cool freshness of lettuce made it more satisfying than it might seem at first glance. Parents liked it because it was easy to prepare, while children often found it a curious but filling lunch option. It appeared in school lunchboxes, community cookbooks, and even wartime guides to simple eating, cementing its place in food history. Though unusual by modern standards, it was a clear reflection of a time when cooks stretched simple pantry staples into meals that were both practical and memorable. Crescent roll cherry cheese. Danish gave homemakers a way to create a bakery-style pastry without needing a professional oven or hours of kneading. By layering crescent dough with cream cheese filling and topping it with canned cherry pie filling, the result was a sweet, creamy, and slightly tangy dessert. The crescent dough baked into a flaky crust that held everything together, giving the illusion of a carefully crafted pastry. These were often served at brunches, showers, or holiday breakfasts when hosts wanted to impress without breaking their backs in the kitchen. Betty Crocker cookbooks emphasized recipes like this because they combined convenience with elegance, making ordinary home cooks feel like they could present something special. The glossy red cherries and creamy center made the dish look festive and appealing. Families who made this often remembered it as one of those recipes that made gatherings feel elevated even when times were modest. It was a dish that could make an ordinary morning feel like a celebration. Waldorf salad cups were a clever way to serve the classic apple and celery salad in individual portions, making them perfect for parties or light meals. This recipe featured a refreshing mix of crisp apples, crunchy celery, walnuts, and sweet mayonnaise-based dressing, all scooped into lettuce leaves or small cups for easy handling. The cups allowed for neat, attractive presentation while offering a balance of textures and flavors that delighted the palate. Popular in the mid-20th century, Waldorf salad cups provided a convenient, mess-free alternative to traditional salads served on plates. The use of simple, fresh ingredients highlighted a trend toward salads that were both wholesome and visually appealing. These individual servings made it easy to enjoy a nutritious dish at gatherings, potlucks, or family dinners. The Waldorf salad cup exemplified mid-century America's desire to combine elegance with practicality in their culinary creations. Cabbage slaw with vinegar dressing was a staple in old cookbooks because it could be thrown together in minutes with only a handful of ingredients. Shredded cabbage was sprinkled with sugar, doused with vinegar, and left to soften slightly before serving. The tangy dressing contrasted with the crunch of the raw cabbage, creating a side dish that was both refreshing and filling. Many homemakers loved this recipe because it made use of a vegetable that was cheap, hearty, and often stored for long periods in root cellars. It was also endlessly adaptable, with onions, peppers, or even carrots sometimes added for extra color and flavor. Unlike mayonnaise-based slaws that came later, the vinegar version was more practical for picnics, church suppers, and potlucks since it did not spoil as quickly. Families appreciated its crisp taste on hot days, and it paired easily with meats, sandwiches, or fried foods. In kitchens where stretching ahead of cabbage could mean several meals, this recipe was a reliable friend. It was thrifty, bright, and a reminder that flavor did not have to come from expensive ingredients. The slaw was simple but never plain, and that is why it was written into so many cookbooks of the past. Okra fritters were a beloved snack or side dish featuring chopped okra mixed into a seasoned batter and fried to golden crispiness. These fritters combined the natural sliminess of okra with crunchy breading to create a texture that was both unique and comforting. Popular in African American cooking, okra was a widely cultivated vegetable with deep roots tracing back to African cuisine. The fritters were often served alongside main dishes or enjoyed as a casual treat, showcasing the versatility of okra beyond stews and soups. The batter typically included cornmeal or flour, herbs, and spices to enhance the flavor and add a satisfying bite. Okra fritters were a practical and tasty way to celebrate local produce while creating a dish that appealed to all ages. Their crispy exterior and tender interior made them a crowd favorite at family dinners and community gatherings. This recipe exemplifies how traditional ingredients were elevated through simple, skillful preparation. Tomato soup popsicles might sound like a prank today, but back in the 1950s, they were actually promoted as a wholesome treat. The idea was simple. Take condensed tomato soup, dilute it slightly with milk or water, freeze it in molds, and present it as a healthy snack for children. In a world where dessert was often rationed or costly, these frozen soup pops were pitched as a way to get vegetables into children while giving them something sweet and cool for summer. Of course, anyone who tried one quickly realized that cold tomato soup on a stick was not exactly a crowd pleaser. Still, Campbell's leaned into the health angle and even printed variations in promotional cookbooks. Parents bought into it for a while, trying to sneak nutrition into dessert time, but the idea faded fast once children figured out the trick. Today, tomato soup popsicles survive only as one of those oddball vanished recipes that makes you wonder how far advertising could push families. Mayonnaise banana salad is one of those recipes that perfectly captures the quirky creativity of mid-century cookbooks. It involved halved bananas laid on lettuce leaves, topped with a dollop of mayonnaise and sprinkled with crushed peanuts or sometimes shredded cheese. The result was a dish that looked fancy, tasted unexpectedly rich, and could be put together in under 5 minutes. It was often served as a light starter at luncheons, church potlucks, or even holiday tables, where its odd combination sparked conversation as much as it fed guests. The sweetness of the banana clashed and yet strangely worked with the tang of the mayonnaise, while the crunch of peanuts added contrast. Recipes like this showed how home cooks weren't afraid to experiment with unusual pairings, especially when they could make an inexpensive dish seem special. Though it's largely forgotten now, mayonnaise banana salad remains one of those recipes that people recall with equal parts nostalgia and disbelief. Crescent roll taco bake was a recipe that showed how cookbooks in the 1970s were starting to embrace Tex-Mex flavors in family kitchens. Crescent dough was pressed into a baking dish to form a crust filled with seasoned ground beef, beans, or cheese, then topped with more dough to bake into a hearty casserole. The finished dish was both familiar and new, blending the flavors of tacos with the ease of a pie. Families loved how simple it was to stretch ingredients into a meal that could feed everyone, and the novelty made dinner more exciting than usual. For parents, it was a way to introduce new flavors without leaving behind the comfort of dough and cheese that children already loved. Betty Crocker recipes encouraged this kind of playful experimentation, and the taco bake quickly became one of those crossover dishes that bridged tradition with emerging tastes. It was warm, filling, and something that made the whole table feel like they were trying something adventurous together. Creamed corn on toast served as a comforting and quick Southern-inspired dish that made the most of pantry staples. This recipe blended tender corn kernels with a creamy sauce, often thickened with butter and milk, poured generously over toasted bread. The result was a rich, warm meal or side that offered both softness and a touch of sweetness in every bite. Creamed corn on toast was favored for its simplicity, requiring little time or complicated ingredients, yet delivering a satisfying flavor. Its roots lay in Southern cooking traditions where corn was a dietary mainstay and stretching meals creatively was common. This dish was especially popular during times when fresh vegetables were scarce, but canned or frozen corn was more readily available. It provided comfort and nourishment with minimal fuss, fitting perfectly into the fast-paced routines of mid-century households. The toast added a pleasant crunch that contrasted with the smoothness of the creamed corn, making it a textural delight. Over the years, it became a nostalgic favorite remembered for its humble origins and dependable appeal. Mock egg lemon soup was a Depression-era lifesaver that made its way into many family recipe cards and church cookbooks. The premise was simple. Instead of long-simmered chicken soup, you heated up a quick broth, whisked in eggs, and added a squeeze of lemon for brightness. The hot broth would cook the eggs almost instantly, creating silky strands that thickened the liquid without any flour or cream. In less than 10 minutes, you had a dish that tasted like comfort but cost next to nothing. Families appreciated the warm, tangy flavor on cold days, and since both eggs and lemons could stretch across several meals, this soup quickly became a favorite. Its Greek inspiration was often mentioned, but the thrifty American version was much lighter and faster. You could have a pot on the table in the time it took to set out the bowls, making it one of those resourceful recipes that never really went away. Pigtail stew was a slow-cooked, hearty dish that turned inexpensive pork pigtails into a deeply flavorful meal treasured in many African-American homes. This stew simmered the tough, gelatin-rich cuts for hours with aromatic vegetables and spices, creating a rich broth that was both comforting and economical. Historically, pigtails were a go-to ingredient during times when budgets were tight and every part of the animal was valued for nourishment. The stew reflected a resourceful cooking tradition, transforming humble ingredients into satisfying family dinners. Often accompanied by cornbread or rice, pigtail stew carried the flavors of the South and the resilience of a community making the most of limited resources. This recipe remains a testament to culinary ingenuity and cultural pride, showcasing how simple cuts of meat could become cherished comfort food. For many, it was not just a meal, but a link to ancestral cooking practices passed down through generations. Rediscovering this recipe reveals both the creativity and heart that defined old African-American cookbooks and kitchens. Souped-up pancakes were another quirky Campbell's experiment that turned heads in the 1950s and 60s. The base recipe was just like any normal pancake mix, but instead of using plain milk, you stirred in condensed tomato soup. What came out of the skillet were bright orange pancakes with a tangy aftertaste that baffled many first-timers. They were often served with savory toppings like cheese or ham instead of syrup, which gave them a strange in-between identity. Some families swore by them as a breakfast change-up, while others tried once and never looked back. The marketing behind them leaned on the "add a vegetable to breakfast" line, suggesting that soup could make flapjacks healthier and more substantial. The reality was that most people could not quite reconcile the sweet tang of soup in their morning stack. Still, souped-up pancakes were remembered fondly by a few who liked to experiment, and they vanished from cookbooks once the novelty wore off. Creamed corn and hot dog skillet was the kind of quick meal that families leaned on when time and money were both in short supply. Sliced hot dogs were browned in a skillet, giving off a savory aroma that kids instantly recognized before a can of creamed corn was stirred in to create a creamy, salty base. It was simple, filling, and ready in just minutes, making it an easy solution for weeknights when something warm had to be on the table fast. The sweetness of the corn balanced the smoky flavor of the hot dogs, and the dish could be stretched further by serving it over bread or rice. This kind of recipe spoke to the ingenuity of mid-century home cooking, where canned goods and inexpensive meats formed the backbone of family meals. It may not sound glamorous, but for families who grew up on it, creamed corn and hot dog skillet carries a kind of comfort that only comes from food born out of necessity and love. Crescent roll sausage balls were the kind of bite-sized snack that instantly called to mind the cocktail parties and casual gatherings of the mid-century era. They were made by combining spicy sausage meat with a bit of cheese, rolling it into small portions, and wrapping each one inside buttery crescent dough before baking until crisp on the outside and tender inside. What made them so appealing was how easy they were to prepare in bulk, which made them perfect for hosts who wanted trays of savory food without hours of labor. They could be served hot out of the oven or at room temperature, and either way they remained flavorful and satisfying. Their richness paired naturally with drinks and became a staple at bridge clubs, holiday gatherings, and neighborhood celebrations. Crescent dough made the recipe accessible to anyone who wanted to look polished without struggling over elaborate recipes. These little sausage balls captured the essence of a time when home entertaining was booming and convenience was king. They were flavorful, practical, and carried the spirit of Betty Crocker's promise to make gatherings easier. Crispy potato pancakes were a beloved pan-fried dish made from grated potatoes, cherished for their golden crunch and comforting flavor. Perfect for breakfast or dinner, these pancakes used simple ingredients like shredded potatoes, eggs, and flour to bind them before frying in oil or butter. The recipe's appeal lay in its quick preparation and the satisfying contrast of a crisp exterior with a tender interior. Mid-20th century families often turned to potato pancakes as an economical way to stretch ingredients while delivering hearty, flavorful meals. The dish was popular in both rural and urban kitchens, often served with sour cream, applesauce, or gravy. Crispy potato pancakes embodied the era's emphasis on practical, filling food that could be made easily with pantry staples. Their enduring popularity speaks to the timeless appeal of simple, well-executed comfort food that warms both body and soul. Vienna sausages with mustard sauce were one of those recipes that combined convenience with just enough flair to feel like a real meal. The sausages came straight from a can, which made them affordable and easy to store. To prepare them, homemakers browned the small links in a skillet and then whisked together a quick glaze of mustard, vinegar, and sugar. Once poured over the sizzling sausages, the sauce thickened slightly, coating them in a tangy, sweet flavor that elevated the humble meat. Families often served the dish over toast, crackers, or with mashed potatoes to make it stretch further. Old cookbooks highlighted this as a dependable recipe for busy nights, when you needed something on the table fast. Children liked the mild flavor of the sausages, while adults appreciated the sharp bite of the mustard sauce. It was not elegant food, but it was practical, filling, and just distinctive enough to stand out from the ordinary. In many homes, this quick recipe became an affordable treat remembered long after the cans disappeared from the pantry. Turkey neck soup was a nourishing broth-based soup made using flavorful turkey necks simmered with root vegetables and herbs to create a rich, hearty meal. This soup made use of often overlooked parts of the turkey, reflecting a tradition of resourcefulness and respect for the whole animal. The necks were slowly cooked until tender, releasing deep flavors into the broth that was both warming and sustaining. Root vegetables like carrots, onions, and potatoes added body and nutrition, making the soup a filling choice especially in colder months. Popular in African American households, this recipe symbolized thriftiness and culinary skill, turning inexpensive cuts into delicious meals. The soup was commonly served with cornbread or rice and was a staple at family tables during gatherings and everyday dinners alike. Its enduring popularity speaks to a legacy of making the most of what was available while creating comforting, flavorful food. Tomato soup donuts may be the most bizarre sweet experiment to come from Campbell's old cookbooks. The recipe folded condensed tomato soup into the dough, giving the finished donuts a reddish hue and a faint tang beneath the sugar glaze. At a glance, they looked like ordinary treats, but the flavor was unmistakably different. Campbell's marketed them as a way to sneak nutrition into desserts and cut down on waste by using pantry staples. Children who bit into them expecting classic donuts often had mixed reactions, while adults debated whether they were clever or confusing. The soup added moisture, making them soft, but the underlying tomato taste never fully disappeared. Despite their oddness, these donuts had a brief moment of popularity during the 1950s and 60s when novelty recipes were trendy. Eventually, though, families moved back to traditional donuts, leaving this experiment behind. Tomato soup donuts are a vanished curiosity, a reminder that even desserts were not safe from soup cans. Peach half with cottage cheese was one of those deceptively simple dishes that found its way into mid-century cookbooks and lunch counters alike. A canned peach half was placed on a bed of lettuce, topped with a generous scoop of cottage cheese, and often crowned with a maraschino cherry for a splash of color. This combination was praised for being refreshing, nutritious, and quick to prepare, requiring little more than a can opener and a spoon. The sweet juiciness of the peach balanced the savory creaminess of the cottage cheese, creating a contrast that appealed to adults looking for a light lunch or side dish. It was especially popular in cafeterias and at ladies' luncheons, where presentation mattered just as much as flavor. The cheerful look of the bright orange fruit and red cherry made it feel celebratory, even though it was inexpensive. While today it might seem outdated or overly simple, peach half with cottage cheese remains a nostalgic symbol of practical mid-century cooking, when canned goods were embraced as modern and efficient. Pigs in a blanket with crescent dough were an enduring party favorite that worked just as well at bridge clubs as they did at game day gatherings. Small sausages or cocktail franks were wrapped in triangles of dough, then baked until the pastry puffed up and turned golden brown. They were bite-sized, easy to grab, and impossible to stop eating once the tray was on the table. The contrast of buttery crust and savory sausage made them both addictive and comforting. These little bites showed up in countless Betty Crocker cookbooks and were advertised as perfect solutions for casual entertaining. They were affordable too, which meant hosts could make large platters without spending much. Children adored them, adults appreciated their simplicity, and they became one of those recipes that felt timeless. Even now, pigs in a blanket carry the charm of a snack that never really left the American table, even if it began decades earlier in mid-century kitchens. Ham and cheese roll-ups offered a simple, no-fuss solution to lunchtime or snack needs during the mid-century years. These roll-ups combined thin slices of ham and cheese wrapped inside soft bread or tortillas, providing a quick and satisfying bite without the need for heating or cooking. The appeal lay in their portability and ease of assembly, making them ideal for packed lunches or impromptu snacks. Kids and adults alike enjoyed these nostalgic treats for their familiar flavors and straightforward construction. Roll-ups were a go-to option for busy households, especially when time was limited but nourishment was essential. Often, they incorporated whatever deli meats and cheeses were on hand, making them versatile and budget-friendly. The recipe's popularity endured because it required minimal preparation and no special kitchen tools, allowing even novice cooks to put together a tasty meal in minutes. Beyond convenience, the ham and cheese roll-ups evoke memories of school days and simple family gatherings, carrying a comforting sense of familiarity. They reflect a time when classic ingredients combined in practical ways to meet everyday needs without sacrificing taste. Cucumber and sour cream salad was one of those fast dishes that found its way into nearly every old cookbook because it required so little effort and always tasted refreshing. Thin slices of cucumber were tossed in a dressing made from sour cream, sugar, and a splash of vinegar or lemon juice to give it balance. The sweet and tangy mixture clung to the crisp cucumber slices, making the salad both cooling and creamy. In summer months, it was often served straight from the icebox, which gave it even more appeal. Housewives appreciated how quickly it came together, often in less than 10 minutes, and how it could stretch a garden's worth of cucumbers into a dish that seemed more substantial. Families liked it as a side with roast meats or sandwiches, and it often appeared at picnics or potlucks because it traveled well in jars. The salad's popularity came from its thrift as much as its taste, since cucumbers were cheap and sour cream was often at hand. It was simple, satisfying, and a little bit special without being complicated. Peach and cornbread pudding was a layered dessert that brought together juicy fresh peaches and moist, crumbly cornbread soaked in a sweet custard. This dish capitalized on the abundance of peaches during harvest season and the staple nature of cornbread in southern kitchens. Home cooks layered slices of cornbread with peeled, sliced peaches before pouring a creamy mixture of eggs, milk, and sugar over the top. The pudding was then baked until golden and set, producing a warm, comforting dessert that balanced fruity sweetness with a buttery texture. This recipe represented a resourceful use of pantry staples and seasonal fruits, turning simple ingredients into a memorable treat. It was often served at family dinners and church socials, embodying both hospitality and tradition. The combination of fruit and cornbread made it a unique contribution to African American culinary heritage, showcasing creativity in desserts. Today, it remains a nostalgic favorite that connects modern palates to classic Southern flavors. Super burgers were the kind of dish that could only come from the mid-century kitchen when convenience cooking was booming and families wanted meals that stretched every dollar. The recipe was as simple as it was strange. You took ground beef, mixed it with a can of condensed Campbell's soup, spread it across split buns, and then baked them until the meat set and the tops bubbled. They were open-faced burgers that looked a little off, but somehow satisfied when money and ingredients were running thin. Kids loved them because it felt like fast food, while mothers loved them because the soup did the heavy lifting with seasoning. It was also a budget trick since the soup made the beef go further and added bulk that kept bellies full. While the super burger has disappeared from cookbooks and most memories, it stands as a reminder of how much creativity and compromise went into everyday meals in the 1950s and 1960s. They were quirky, cheap, and surprisingly comforting for what they were. Bologna and pickle roll-ups were a popular finger food that highlighted the practicality and humor of American kitchens in the 1950s and 60s. Thin slices of bologna were spread with cream cheese or relish, then rolled tightly and sometimes secured with toothpicks. They were quick to prepare, portable, and perfect for serving at parties, picnics, or casual family snacks. Children loved the salty tang of the pickle paired with the soft meat, while adults appreciated how easy they were to make in large batches. These roll-ups became common in lunchboxes as well, since they could be wrapped and eaten without fuss. They reflected the broader mid-century trend of turning inexpensive ingredients into fun, shareable foods that added personality to gatherings. Though today they might seem more like a novelty than a serious dish, bologna and pickle roll-ups once carried the spirit of convenience and creativity that made American potluck culture thrive. Crescent roll sloppy joe cups were a mid-century reinvention of a thrifty, messy meal into something portable and neat. Instead of piling the saucy beef mixture onto bread, home cooks pressed crescent dough into muffin tins and filled each cup with sloppy joe filling. The result was handheld, less messy, and still carried all the flavor of the original. This was the kind of idea that spoke directly to busy families who wanted dinners that could be eaten quickly without fuss. Leftovers could easily be repurposed this way, which made them budget-friendly as well. Betty Crocker promoted these cups as clever solutions for stretching meals and making them feel fresh again. Children loved the novelty of pulling a filled crescent cup out of the pan, and parents liked that they could portion control with ease. They became one of those recipes that made weeknights feel less chaotic and more put together, while still staying affordable and satisfying. Quick Shrimp Cocktail emerged as a popular 1950s appetizer that combined pre-cooked shrimp with a tangy cocktail sauce, offering an elegant yet simple starter. This dish required minimal preparation, as cooked shrimp could be chilled and served with a zesty sauce made from ketchup, horseradish, lemon juice, and Worcestershire sauce. The shrimp cocktail embodied mid-century America's fascination with easy entertaining and accessible luxury. It provided a sophisticated touch to gatherings without demanding hours in the kitchen. Shrimp cocktail's popularity was boosted by the growing availability of frozen and pre-cooked seafood products, which made it feasible for home cooks to offer seafood dishes more regularly. The cold, crisp shrimp paired with a flavorful sauce created a refreshing contrast that was perfect for parties or light meals. Its presentation in cocktail glasses or on platters added to its charm. This dish remains a classic example of mid-century Americana's blend of convenience and class. Sardine salad sandwich was one of those recipes that reflected the ingenuity of frugal kitchens, especially during years when meat was expensive or scarce. Cooks would mash canned sardines with mayonnaise, lemon juice, and sometimes chopped onion or celery to create a flavorful spread. The mixture could be prepared in minutes and spread onto bread or crackers for a meal that was cheap yet nourishing. Old cookbooks encouraged this recipe because sardines were inexpensive, shelf-stable, and packed with protein and healthy oils. Families often served the sandwiches for lunches, picnics, or even light suppers, making it a versatile standby. The flavor was bold but balanced by the creamy mayonnaise and bright lemon. For households needing to stretch a few cans into several servings, this recipe worked beautifully. It was not fancy, but it was practical, and for many it became a nostalgic taste of childhood lunches. Sardine salad sandwiches stood as proof that old cookbooks made the most of every pantry staple. Smoked turkey neck beans were a flavorful, smoky dish where beans were simmered slowly with smoked turkey necks to infuse rich, savory depth. This recipe capitalized on inexpensive turkey parts, turning them into a key ingredient that enriched the broth and added unique texture. The beans absorbed the smoky aroma and meaty essence, creating a satisfying and filling meal often served with rice or cornbread. This dish was common in African American households during times when resourcefulness was vital, making the most of every part of the bird. Seasonings such as onions, garlic, and bay leaves heightened the flavor, while the slow cooking allowed the meat to become tender and the beans to soften perfectly. Smoked turkey neck beans embodied traditional soul food values of thrift, taste, and comfort. It was a practical yet beloved way to enjoy protein-rich meals without expensive cuts. Today, it stands as a delicious reminder of culinary ingenuity and cultural resilience. Campbell's Chili Con. Carn dip was one of those party recipes that briefly exploded in popularity before fading completely. This dip was made by combining tomato soup, chili powder, shredded cheese, and sometimes canned beans into a bubbling hot bowl served with crackers or chips. It was marketed as a Tex-Mex-inspired dish during the post-war fascination with regional American foods. The appeal was simple. It was cheap, easy, and could feed a whole gathering without much effort. For housewives juggling social get-togethers, this was a godsend because it looked hearty, but required only pantry staples. Unfortunately, the flavor did not live up to the hype. It often came out thin, overly tangy, and lacking the rich body of real chili or queso dips. Still, for a brief moment, it was the centerpiece of many card nights and church potlucks. As palates expanded and authentic dips became more common, Campbell's Chili Con Carn dip quietly vanished from the party table. The Spam and mustard sandwich spread was another recipe that thrived in the era of canned convenience and quick preparation. Chopped Spam was mixed with mustard, mayonnaise, and sometimes relish, then spread generously onto bread or crackers. It provided a salty, tangy punch that was both filling and inexpensive, making it a go-to option for school lunches, picnics, or hurried family dinners. Families appreciated it because it could be made in large quantities with minimal cost and effort. The spread stored well and could be dressed up with lettuce or cheese, but it was satisfying even in its plain form. Spam was celebrated in cookbooks of the time for its versatility, and this sandwich spread was one of its most practical applications. While Spam recipes are less common today, this spread embodies the no-nonsense creativity of the period, when convenience foods were celebrated for helping families save both money and time. Crescent roll stromboli was an Americanized take on an Italian loaf that quickly became a dependable family favorite. Traditional stromboli called for yeast dough that required time to rise and patience to prepare, but Betty Crocker cookbooks found a shortcut that fit the rhythm of mid-century households. By using crescent dough instead of a traditional loaf, home cooks could skip the long process and still end up with something hearty, filling, and impressive enough to put at the center of the table. Cold cuts such as salami, ham, or pepperoni were layered with cheeses like mozzarella or provolone, sprinkled with herbs, and rolled tightly into a log before being baked. Once it came out of the oven, the loaf could be sliced into golden, cheesy spirals that showed off the beautiful layers inside. Families loved how it could serve as a dinner, a snack, or even a party centerpiece when paired with salad or dipping sauce. This stromboli reflected the way Italian-American traditions were being folded into American cookbooks while still keeping things simple and affordable for ordinary kitchens. Ham and pineapple skewers were a delightful combination of sweet and savory flavors that became a hallmark of mid-20th century entertaining. These bite-sized skewers featured chunks of salty ham paired with juicy pineapple, often grilled or baked to meld the tastes together beautifully. The dish reflected the period's fascination with tropical ingredients, which were becoming more accessible and trendy in American kitchens. Ham and pineapple skewers were easy to prepare and served as popular appetizers at parties and family gatherings. Their contrasting flavors provided a refreshing balance, while the colorful presentation added visual appeal to any spread. This recipe showcased the culinary creativity of the time, merging familiar proteins with exotic fruit to create exciting new taste experiences. It was a crowd pleaser that required little effort but offered big flavor, making it a go-to for hosts looking to impress without spending hours in the kitchen. Ham and pineapple skewers remain a nostalgic reminder of the era's adventurous yet accessible approach to food. Spiced sweet potato biscuits were fluffy, tender biscuits made by incorporating mashed sweet potatoes and warm spices into classic biscuit dough. This recipe blended the natural sweetness of the potatoes with cinnamon, nutmeg, or allspice to create a flavorful breakfast or side dish unique to African American kitchens. The biscuits were often served alongside savory dishes or enjoyed with butter and honey for a comforting start to the day. Sweet potatoes were a staple crop in the South, prized for their nutrition and versatility, and incorporating them into biscuits was a way to add moisture and flavor while stretching ingredients. The warm spices lent a cozy aroma and taste reminiscent of home cooking and seasonal celebrations. These biscuits showcase the creativity and love embedded in traditional baking, transforming simple pantry items into something special. The recipe remains a treasured link to culinary heritage and continues to inspire modern variations that honor its roots. Soup barbecue cups were one of Campbell's more successful experiments, though they too eventually disappeared. The recipe used biscuit dough pressed into muffin tins, filled with ground beef mixed with tomato soup and barbecue sauce, and topped with cheese. Once baked, they came out as individual cups that were easy to serve and fun to eat. Families loved them because they were portable, kid-friendly, and made use of inexpensive ingredients. The combination of smoky sauce, tangy soup, and gooey cheese made them more appealing than some of Campbell's stranger ideas. They worked well for weeknight dinners or even casual parties where finger food was in demand. But as prepackaged snack foods and frozen appetizers became more common, these homemade versions fell out of style. Still, they captured the ingenuity of the mid-century kitchen, where soup could be transformed into nearly anything. Soup barbecue cups remain a vanished reminder of when creativity stretched every meal. Saltine cracker pizza was a playful makeshift recipe that many children of the 1960s and 70s still remember fondly. Made by topping saltine crackers with ketchup or tomato sauce and shredded cheese, then broiling them for a few minutes, it was the ultimate quick snack. It offered the taste of pizza without the time or expense, making it a favorite among busy parents and resourceful kids. The crisp saltine base, gooey cheese, and tangy sauce came together in a way that felt indulgent, even though it was incredibly simple. Families often made them as after-school treats or late-night snacks, and they became a common recipe in community cookbooks that celebrated quick, thrifty meals. While today it might be dismissed as too basic, saltine cracker pizza was beloved for its creativity and the joy it brought to children who felt like they were eating something special. It was proof that even the humblest ingredients could be turned into comfort food. Roll chicken pot pie pockets were the answer to busy weeknights when families wanted comfort but did not have the time to make a full casserole. Instead of rolling out a pie crust, the chicken filling was spooned into crescent dough, folded and baked into neat handheld pies. They carried all the creamy flavor of traditional chicken pot pie, but with the convenience of grab-and-go baking. Parents liked how they could stretch leftover chicken and frozen vegetables into something hearty without dirtying too many dishes. Kids enjoyed that these were easy to hold, less messy, and just the right size for after-school hunger. They quickly became a cookbook favorite because they showed how practical Betty Crocker recipes could be while still keeping the cozy taste of home cooking. Families often remembered these as the meal that warmed them up in both body and spirit. Turkey and cranberry wraps were a clever and quick lunch idea that made excellent use of holiday leftovers in mid-century America. This recipe wrapped slices of leftover roasted turkey with a spread of sweet cranberry sauce inside soft tortillas or flatbreads. It offered a perfect balance between savory and sweet, combining the hearty flavors of turkey with the bright tartness of cranberries. Turkey and cranberry wraps were appreciated for their speed of assembly and portability, making them ideal for packed lunches or light dinners. The dish reflected the era's emphasis on practicality and frugality, encouraging cooks to creatively reuse festive ingredients. Its fresh, vibrant taste made it appealing beyond the holiday season, extending its presence in everyday meals. This recipe highlighted how simple ingredients could be transformed into satisfying, flavorful options that fit the busy pace of post-war life. Turkey and cranberry wraps continue to evoke the warmth and resourcefulness of classic American cooking traditions. Quick escalloped tomatoes was one of those recipes that appeared in nearly every community cookbook because of its low cost and speed. The instructions were straightforward. Open a can of tomatoes, stir them with breadcrumbs, butter, and a pinch of sugar, then bake them just until hot and bubbling. In 10 minutes flat, you had a side dish that stretched canned goods into something hearty and flavorful. Families served it alongside meats or with slices of bread, and it quickly became a way to make canned vegetables feel more like a proper meal. The texture of soft tomatoes and crunchy crumbs gave it appeal, while the butter made it feel more indulgent than it really was. For many households, this was the kind of recipe that bridged the gap between practicality and comfort, proving that even with limited ingredients, flavor could still shine. Sweet potato pie cookies were bite-sized treats that captured the warm, spiced flavors of traditional sweet potato pie in a portable, easy-to-eat form. These cookies combined mashed sweet potatoes, cinnamon, nutmeg, and brown sugar with a tender cookie dough to mimic the taste and aroma of the beloved dessert. Perfect for family gatherings, potlucks, or everyday snacking, they offered a convenient way to enjoy familiar holiday flavors year-round. The recipe showed the creativity of home bakers who adapted classic dishes into new formats, making desserts accessible and fun. Sweet potato pie cookies maintained the creamy, comforting essence of the original pie, while adding a crisp, chewy texture that delighted all ages. Their popularity in African American kitchens spoke to a culture of innovation grounded in tradition. They remain a nostalgic favorite, evoking memories of warmth, celebration, and the joy of homemade sweets. Cream of mushroom pizza squares were pitched as sophisticated cocktail party food, but in reality they were little more than pantry snacks dressed up. You started with squares of white bread, spread on a mixture of cream of mushroom soup and shredded cheese, then baked them until golden. The result was a finger food that was crispy, gooey, and surprisingly satisfying for guests nibbling between highballs. They were cheap to make, could be assembled quickly, and felt just fancy enough to serve at parties. This recipe became a hit in suburban entertaining culture because it offered something beyond chips and dip, but did not break the bank. Still, the heavy reliance on canned soup and processed cheese meant it dated quickly as party foods evolved. By the late 20th century, people had moved on to fresher options, and these little squares disappeared from circulation. Today, cream of mushroom pizza squares are remembered as relics of a simpler, entertaining era. Fruit cocktail whip was a sweet, colorful dish that blurred the line between salad and dessert. Canned fruit cocktail, with its assortment of peaches, pears, grapes, and cherries, was folded into whipped topping to create a light, creamy mixture. The result was chilled and served in bowls or cups, often topped with extra cherries for decoration. Children adored it because it tasted like candy, while adults appreciated its refreshing sweetness, especially in the summer months. It was a fixture at potlucks, holiday tables, and school functions, where its pastel colors and airy texture made it a standout among heavier dishes. Homemakers liked it because it was inexpensive, easy to prepare, and could be made in advance without losing appeal. Its charm lay in its playfulness, offering comfort and fun with every bite. While modern tastes may lean away from such sugary combinations, fruit cocktail whip remains a nostalgic reminder of a time when canned fruit was celebrated as a mark of progress and modern convenience. Cheese and pickle toasties offered a warm, tangy snack that was a common fixture in vintage American cookbooks. These toasties combined melted cheese with pickles, sandwiched between slices of bread and grilled or toasted until golden and bubbly. The contrasting flavors of creamy cheese and sharp pickles created a satisfying balance that made this snack appealing across age groups. Quick to assemble and easy to cook, cheese and pickle toasties became a favorite when a simple yet flavorful snack was needed without fuss. The recipe's enduring popularity stemmed from its use of accessible ingredients and the way it elevated basic staples into a tasty treat. These toasties often brought a sense of nostalgia, reminding many of afternoons spent at home or school with comforting homemade snacks. They exemplify how mid-century cooks combined familiar flavors in straightforward ways to deliver maximum enjoyment with minimal effort. The warm, crispy exterior and gooey filling remain a hallmark of this beloved classic. Shrimp wiggle was the kind of dish that perfectly captured the spirit of mid-century convenience cooking, and it was as charmingly simple as it sounds. Housewives looking to put something quick and satisfying on the table would open a can of shrimp, another can of peas, and stir both into a quick white sauce made from butter, flour, and milk. Once thickened, the whole mixture would be spooned generously over toast, biscuits, or even rice. What made this dish endure in old cookbooks was not only how inexpensive it was, but how much it looked like a true dinner, when in reality it took barely 10 minutes from start to finish. Children loved the creamy sauce and bright peas, while adults felt like they were eating something elegant thanks to the shrimp. The name itself added a little bit of fun, which made this meal a small morale booster in an otherwise frugal kitchen. Homemade sorghum syrup was a traditional sweetener made by boiling down juice from sorghum cane into a thick, dark syrup used in baking, glazing, and as a table condiment. Sorghum syrup was prized for its robust flavor and affordability, especially in Southern African American households, where it was a pantry staple. The syrup provided a molasses-like sweetness that enhanced cornbread, cakes, and biscuits, adding moisture and depth. Its production was often a communal activity in rural areas, connecting families through shared labor and tradition. Sorghum syrup was favored during times when refined sugar was scarce or expensive, serving as a natural alternative with rich cultural significance. Recipes from old cookbooks highlight its versatility and importance in everyday cooking. Today, sorghum syrup continues to be cherished by those preserving Southern foodways and seeking authentic flavors from the past. Soup barbecue cups were one of Campbell's more successful experiments, though they too eventually disappeared. The recipe used biscuit dough pressed into muffin tins, filled with ground beef mixed with tomato soup and barbecue sauce, and topped with cheese. Once baked, they came out as individual cups that were easy to serve and fun to eat. Families loved them because they were portable, kid-friendly, and made use of inexpensive ingredients. The combination of smoky sauce, tangy soup, and gooey cheese made them more appealing than some of Campbell's stranger ideas. They worked well for weeknight dinners or even casual parties where finger food was in demand. But as prepackaged snack foods and frozen appetizers became more common, these homemade versions fell out of style. Still, they captured the ingenuity of the mid-century kitchen, where soup could be transformed into nearly anything. Soup barbecue cups remain a vanished reminder of when creativity stretched every meal. Creamed tuna on crackers was the kind of dish that bridged the gap between snack and meal in countless mid-century kitchens. Made by mixing canned tuna with cream of mushroom or cream of celery soup, the mixture was warmed and spooned generously over saltine crackers. It was quick, salty, and filling, perfect for busy families who needed something hearty in a hurry. The crackers softened slightly under the warm topping, creating a texture that was oddly comforting. Homemakers appreciated it because it stretched a single can of tuna into something that could feed multiple people without much effort. It often appeared at church socials, casual lunches, or as an easy dinner when groceries were running low. Though today it may not carry the same appeal, it reflects the era's emphasis on convenience and the widespread reliance on canned goods and condensed soups. Creamed tuna on crackers was never glamorous, but it filled bellies and created memories of a time when thrift shaped family meals. Cheesy spinach dip was a quick, crowd-pleasing baked appetizer that became a common sight at mid-20th century gatherings. This dish typically featured frozen chopped spinach, mixed with processed cheeses such as Velveeta or cream cheese, sometimes enhanced with sour cream, mayonnaise, or seasonings to create a smooth, creamy texture. The dip was baked until bubbly and golden on top, making it perfect for serving with crackers, bread, or raw vegetables. Its quick preparation and use of accessible ingredients made it a favorite for busy hosts who wanted to offer something warm and indulgent without spending hours in the kitchen. The popularity of frozen spinach in this recipe reflected advancements in food preservation that allowed for convenient, year-round use of seasonal produce. Cheesy spinach dip also embodied the era's love of creamy, cheesy dishes that balanced convenience and flavor. It remains a nostalgic favorite for many who recall the warm, comforting taste and simple elegance it brought to social occasions. Quick prune whip was one of those desserts that showed up in mid-century cookbooks as a clever way to turn an overlooked fruit into something surprisingly elegant. The process began with stewing prunes until soft, mashing them lightly, and folding them into stiffly whipped egg whites with sugar. The result was a light, airy dessert with a delicate sweetness and a gentle fruit flavor that made it feel more refined than its humble origins. Housewives liked this recipe because it was inexpensive, easy to prepare, and quick to set on the table after supper. It was also considered a healthier dessert option, since prunes were associated with good digestion and wholesome eating. For children, the whip's fluffy texture made it more appealing than simply being handed a bowl of stewed fruit. It was often served chilled in small dishes, sometimes with a dollop of whipped cream when available. This dessert carried the charm of turning something ordinary into a treat without requiring fancy ingredients. It was a practical recipe, but one that still felt indulgent to those who ate it. Quick prune whip reminded families that dessert could be light, fast, and frugal all at once, and it never failed to please. Collard green wraps use tender, blanched collard green leaves as a healthy and flavorful alternative to traditional bread or tortillas for wrapping seasoned fillings. This recipe embraced the natural sturdiness of collards, which held up well to fillings like spiced rice, beans, or meats. The leaves were lightly cooked to soften them without losing their vibrant color or nutrients. This dish showcased a creative way to enjoy familiar flavors in a fresh, wholesome format. It connected to African American traditions of using greens not just as side dishes, but as versatile ingredients in their own right. Collard green wraps were often served at family meals or community events, celebrated for their nutrition and cultural significance. The recipe highlighted a mindful approach to cooking that emphasized freshness, health, and flavor. This technique remains a meaningful way to honor heritage while embracing modern dietary preferences. Upside-down tomato pie was a Campbell's spin on the popular upside-down dessert trend of the mid-century. Instead of pineapple or cake, this recipe featured a savory pie where the filling was condensed tomato soup and vegetables topped with pastry dough. You baked it crust side up, then flipped it over to serve. The result was a savory pie that looked novel and was often used as a conversation piece at dinners. It was affordable and easy since the soup base took care of seasoning and moisture. While clever in design, it never really won hearts. The texture was soggy, the flavor overly tangy, and the flipping process often ended in a mess. Still, for a time, it embodied the playful spirit of Campbell's cookbooks, which leaned heavily on gimmicks and novelty. Upside-down tomato pie disappeared from print after a few years, but remains one of the strangest vanished experiments. Egg salad lettuce cups were a fresh, light, and speedy dish that reflected mid-20th century America's fondness for simple egg preparations. These cups used crisp lettuce leaves as natural vessels, filled with a creamy egg salad made from chopped hard-boiled eggs, mayonnaise, and seasonings. The presentation was both practical and appealing, offering a low-carb alternative to traditional sandwiches. This recipe was favored for its quick assembly and versatility, making it a popular choice for lunches, picnics, or light dinners. The use of lettuce added a refreshing crunch that balanced the richness of the egg salad, enhancing the eating experience. Egg salad lettuce cups fit well within the era's culinary trends focused on convenience and health-conscious options, without sacrificing flavor. Families appreciated how this dish combined ease and nutrition in a neat package that could be enjoyed by all ages. It also brought a touch of elegance to simple ingredients, making everyday meals feel special. Tomato juice cocktail was a spiced drink that appeared frequently in cookbooks of the 1930s and 1940s as both an appetizer and a health tonic. The recipe was quick. Tomato juice poured over ice and seasoned with Worcestershire sauce, lemon juice, and sometimes celery salt or a dash of pepper. Served in glasses before a meal, it was seen as refreshing, inexpensive, and surprisingly sophisticated. Housewives could prepare it in minutes, and it gave even a simple supper the feeling of a restaurant course. At a time when vitamins and nutrition were highly promoted, tomato juice cocktails also gained a reputation as a healthy option. Families liked its tangy flavor, and it was sometimes offered to guests in place of alcoholic drinks during Prohibition and the years that followed. This recipe showed how easily a humble canned product could be elevated with a few dashes of seasoning. It was a thrifty, stylish way to make ordinary meals feel more special. Peanut soup with greens was a hearty and savory dish blending ground peanuts with leafy greens like collards or spinach to create a flavorful and nutritious meal. This soup combined the creamy richness of peanuts, often toasted and ground, with the earthiness of greens, thickened into a satisfying broth. It reflected African culinary roots brought to America, where peanuts and greens became staples in Southern diets. The soup provided protein, fiber, and vitamins, making it a healthful choice during times of limited resources. Spices such as garlic, onions, and chili peppers were added to enhance depth and warmth. Peanut soup with greens was a comforting dish that nourished families, served with cornbread or rice. Its cultural significance lay in its connection to heritage and adaptability, blending available ingredients into a wholesome meal. This recipe embodies the creativity and resilience found in African American kitchens, balancing flavor and sustenance. Sloppy Joe pizza pie was exactly what it sounds like, a casserole that mashed together two American favorites into one quirky dish. The recipe called for making a sloppy Joe mixture using Campbell's tomato soup, spreading it over biscuit or crescent roll dough in a pan, and then topping with cheese before baking. It was gooey, messy, and loaded with flavor, making it a hit for kids and casual family dinners. The pizza angle was mostly in name only since the dish resembled more of a deep dish pie than a pizza. Still, it gave families an affordable weeknight option that felt fun and filling. Sloppy Joe pizza pie enjoyed a brief run of popularity in the 1960s and 70s, but eventually disappeared once frozen pizzas and easy mixes took over the market. It survives only as one of those quirky hybrid recipes that shows just how inventive Campbell's cookbooks once were. Green bean almondine was a speedy and flavorful side dish that perfectly captured mid-century America's love for simple, elegant vegetables. This recipe involved sautéing fresh green beans in butter and tossing them with toasted almonds for a satisfying crunch. The dish was favored for its minimal preparation time and ability to elevate humble green beans into a sophisticated accompaniment. Its buttery richness paired with the nuttiness of almonds complemented a wide range of main courses, from roasted meats to casual dinners. Popular at family gatherings and holiday meals, green bean almondine offered a fresh yet indulgent way to serve vegetables. The recipe's success lay in balancing texture and flavor, while requiring only a few ingredients readily found in most kitchens. This dish reflected the era's trend toward incorporating fresh produce into everyday meals with straightforward, quick cooking methods. Its continued popularity attests to its timeless appeal and the nostalgic memories it evokes of classic American home cooking. Tomato and cottage cheese plate was a dish that reflected both thrift and the diet trends of the mid-20th century. Cookbooks often included it in sections on light suppers or summer meals because it was inexpensive, quick, and required no cooking at all. The recipe was straightforward: thick slices of ripe tomato arranged neatly on a plate and topped with a scoop of cottage cheese, sometimes sprinkled with pepper or paprika for color. It looked wholesome, tasted refreshing, and was considered fashionable during years when calorie-conscious meals were gaining attention. Families who grew tomatoes in their gardens could put together the dish in under 10 minutes, making it both practical and nutritious. Cottage cheese was prized for its protein, and when paired with tomatoes, it made a plate that satisfied without feeling heavy. Though simple, it often appeared at luncheons and gatherings because its bright colors gave it visual appeal. It was the kind of dish that proved old cookbooks valued simplicity just as much as ingenuity. Brown stew chicken was a slow-cooked, richly spiced chicken stew known for its deep, savory flavor and tender meat. This classic dish was a soul food staple, combining marinated chicken pieces with a blend of herbs, spices, and vegetables simmered slowly to develop intense taste. The stew's thick, flavorful sauce was often served over rice or with bread, making it a filling and comforting meal. Brown stew chicken reflected the resourceful use of available ingredients, often making tougher cuts delicious through slow cooking. Its roots traced back to Caribbean and Southern African American kitchens, symbolizing cultural fusion and culinary tradition. The dish was a centerpiece at family gatherings, embodying warmth, hospitality, and history. Today, it continues to be celebrated for its robust flavor and soulful heritage, connecting generations through shared meals and memories. Soup topper hot dogs were another one of those recipes that could only come from an era obsessed with stretching cheap proteins. The process was simple but unusual. Line hot dogs in a pan, cover them with condensed vegetable soup, sprinkle on breadcrumbs, and bake until bubbling. The result was a cross between a casserole and a main dish that promised to turn ordinary hot dogs into something hearty. Parents leaned on this recipe when they needed to feed children with very little time or money. Campbell's pushed it as a fun way to make vegetables more palatable, since the soup would coat every bite with flavor. Children were less convinced, often scraping off the topping to get to the hot dog underneath. Still, it lingered long enough to become a regular entry in community cookbooks before vanishing. Today, soup topper hot dogs stand out as one of those quirky yet earnest attempts to dress up the most basic American staple. Green bean almondine was a speedy and flavorful side dish that perfectly captured mid-century America's love for simple, elegant vegetables. This recipe involved sautéing fresh green beans in butter and tossing them with toasted almonds for a satisfying crunch. The dish was favored for its minimal preparation time and ability to elevate humble green beans into a sophisticated accompaniment. Its buttery richness paired with the nuttiness of almonds complemented a wide range of main courses, from roasted meats to casual dinners. Popular at family gatherings and holiday meals, green bean almondine offered a fresh yet indulgent way to serve vegetables. The recipe's success lay in balancing texture and flavor, while requiring only a few ingredients readily found in most kitchens. This dish reflected the era's trend toward incorporating fresh produce into everyday meals with straightforward, quick-cooking methods. Its continued popularity attests to its timeless appeal and the nostalgic memories it evokes of classic American home cooking. Applesauce cakelets were a charming way to bring homemade sweetness to the table in almost no time at all. Cookbooks suggested mixing flour, sugar, spices, and applesauce into a quick batter, then baking the mixture in small tins or cupcake pans. Because the applesauce added both moisture and flavor, the cakes required very little fat, which made them perfect during times when butter or shortening was scarce. The batter came together quickly, and in less than 10 minutes it could be in the oven baking. Families loved the warm spice scent that filled the house, and the small cakelets were easy to share or pack into lunches. Applesauce cakelets were also forgiving, which meant they worked even for inexperienced bakers. The recipe was endlessly adaptable with nuts or raisins when available, but it was delicious even in its simplest form. They represented the spirit of old cookbooks, proving that speed and thrift could still deliver something that felt indulgent. Campbell's Cracker Pizza was a dish born from budget creativity and sheer necessity. The recipe layered saltine crackers with tomato soup, shredded cheese, and bits of leftover meat or vegetables, then baked it until crisp. It was pitched as a thrifty alternative to ordering or making a full pizza, and families often leaned on it when money was tight. The crackers acted as the crust, absorbing the soup and becoming soft underneath while still crisping slightly on top. For children, it was a novelty to call this pizza, and for parents, it was a way to put dinner on the table with minimal cost. It had a certain charm in community cookbooks and quickly became associated with frugal households. But once frozen pizzas entered the market and fresh dough became more accessible, Campbell's Cracker Pizza lost its appeal. Today, it is remembered as one of those vanished recipes that shows how far people were willing to stretch the idea of pizza. Sweet potato fries offered a fast and delicious way to enjoy an inexpensive seasonal root vegetable that was especially popular during mid-century America. These fries were typically prepared by slicing sweet potatoes into thin strips and cooking them quickly either in a hot oven or skillet with oil until crisp and golden. Sweet potato fries stood out for their natural sweetness and vibrant color, providing a tasty alternative to traditional potato fries. Their preparation was straightforward, requiring few ingredients and little time, making them accessible to home cooks of all skill levels. The dish capitalized on the affordability and availability of sweet potatoes during certain seasons, turning them into a crowd-pleasing snack or side. Sweet potato fries reflected the era's emphasis on practical, flavorful dishes that could be enjoyed quickly and easily. They remain a beloved comfort food that carries the warmth and nostalgia of classic American cooking. Pea fritters were one of those clever Depression-era recipes that turned inexpensive canned vegetables into something filling and satisfying. Cooks would mash peas with a little flour and egg, season them with salt and pepper, and drop spoonfuls of the mixture into a hot skillet. In minutes, the patties crisped on the outside while staying tender inside, creating a dish that was both thrifty and hearty. Old cookbooks praised pea fritters as an excellent way to serve vegetables in a form that children were more likely to eat. They were versatile too, working as a side dish, a quick lunch, or even a meat substitute when supplies were low. Families often topped them with gravy or a dab of ketchup to add flavor. For households trying to stretch every can in the pantry, pea fritters felt like a small victory. They were quick to prepare, easy to adapt, and proof that even the simplest ingredients could become something memorable with a little imagination. Soup-glazed carrots were an attempt to make everyday vegetables appear more exciting and indulgent during the 1950s. The idea was simple. Coat sliced carrots in condensed tomato soup mixed with sugar or honey, then bake until glossy. The end result was a bright red side dish that looked more like candy than a vegetable. Parents loved the visual appeal, convincing children to eat carrots that had taken on a sweet and tangy taste. Campbell's promoted it as a way to put new sparkle on the dinner table, arguing that vegetables could be fun. Housewives appreciated how inexpensive it was, using pantry staples to transform plain carrots into something memorable. The dish even became a talking point at potlucks and holiday dinners for a short while. But over time, the heavy sweetness wore thin, and families returned to simpler ways of preparing vegetables. Soup-glazed carrots faded from cookbooks, leaving behind only whispers of a shiny side dish. Bacon-wrapped dates were a quick and flavorful appetizer combining smoky, salty bacon with sweet, chewy dates. This simple yet indulgent dish provided a delightful contrast in taste and texture that made it a popular choice for parties and casual gatherings during the mid-century era. The recipe required minimal ingredients and little time, making it accessible to home cooks looking to impress guests without elaborate preparations. Bacon-wrapped dates reflected a trend toward finger foods that offered both richness and a hint of exotic sweetness, appealing to evolving palates. The dish also showcased the inventive use of contrasting flavors typical of the period's culinary experimentation. Its ease of preparation and crowd-pleasing nature helped cement its place on appetizer menus and family celebrations alike. Bacon-wrapped dates remain a beloved classic that represents mid-20th century America's knack for combining simple ingredients into memorable bites. Ham and pickle relish. Sandwich spread is another reminder of how cookbooks leaned heavily on economy and speed. All it took was grinding up leftover ham, mixing it with a few spoonfuls of sweet pickle relish, and binding it all together with mayonnaise or mustard. In under 10 minutes, you had a spread that could be layered onto bread, stuffed into rolls, or served with crackers. It turned small scraps of meat into something filling, and the relish added enough tang to disguise the fact that the portion of ham was very small. This recipe became especially popular in wartime cookbooks when stretching protein was essential. Families enjoyed the bright, savory flavor and the convenience of having a ready-to-serve sandwich filler. It was perfect for school lunches or quick suppers, and many people still recall this as a nostalgic favorite from their childhood kitchen tables. Souped-up fondant potatoes were an unusual Campbell's recipe that tried to merge fine dining presentation with pantry staples. Fondant potatoes are traditionally cylinders of potato browned in butter and roasted in stock. Campbell's simplified this by replacing stock with condensed consommé, which made the dish richer and easier for home cooks. The potatoes were browned, placed in a pan, covered with soup, and baked until tender with a glossy finish. The effect was elegant enough to serve at dinner parties, but still cheap enough for everyday meals. Families who tried it often felt they were preparing something extravagant without spending much. However, the reliance on condensed soup gave the dish a sameness that wore thin quickly. As cooking styles modernized, this recipe faded into obscurity, surviving only in old pamphlets. Souped-up fondant potatoes vanished quietly, remembered by few but showing the lengths Campbell's went to make soup seem sophisticated. Pimento cheese spread stood as a creamy, flavorful favorite that doubled as a dip or sandwich filling and became iconic in Southern kitchens. This spread combined sharp cheddar cheese with mayonnaise and diced pimentos, creating a smooth yet tangy mixture that brought vibrant color and taste to simple dishes. Pimento cheese's appeal was rooted in its versatility and ease of preparation, making it a go-to for quick snacks, party platters, and picnic fare. Families cherished this recipe for its comforting richness and ability to elevate basic ingredients. It was also budget-friendly, relying on readily available pantry staples to produce a satisfying result. The spread became a cultural staple, symbolizing Southern hospitality and home cooking traditions. Its creamy texture and bright flavor offered a delicious contrast to crackers, bread, or raw vegetables. Pimento cheese spread remains a beloved classic that reflects the warmth and resourcefulness of mid-20th century American kitchens. Grapefruit halves with brown sugar were a breakfast table staple in the 40s and 50s, and they could not be simpler. Housewives would cut grapefruits in half, loosen the sections with a knife, sprinkle the tops with brown sugar, and place them under the broiler just long enough for the sugar to bubble. In less than 10 minutes, You had a dish that looked elegant, yet cost very little. The bitterness of the grapefruit paired with the sweetness of the caramelized sugar made for a refreshing start to the day. Many cookbooks praised this dish as a healthy option during a time when vitamins were heavily emphasized in advertising and diet culture. It also became popular as a light dessert for luncheons, adding a touch of sophistication without requiring any complicated preparation. With its bright color and quick assembly, this recipe was one of the easiest ways to impress with almost no effort. Mini cornbread muffins were a staple in many American kitchens, prized for their quick baking time and delightful corn flavor. These small individual muffins were made from cornmeal batter, often enriched with buttermilk, eggs, and a touch of sugar or honey. The muffins were perfect for accompanying soups, stews, or barbecue, providing a slightly sweet and crumbly side that balanced savory dishes. Their convenient size made them ideal for portion control and easy serving at family meals or gatherings. Mid-century home cooks valued mini cornbread muffins for their simplicity and the comforting warmth they brought to the table. The recipe's popularity also reflected a Southern culinary influence that spread across the country during this period. Mini cornbread muffins continue to evoke fond memories of home-cooked meals and traditional American flavors. Boston lettuce with French dressing was one of the quickest salads to prepare, but it carried a sense of refinement that appealed to homemakers who wanted meals to feel special. The recipe called for tender leaves of Boston lettuce arranged in a bowl and drizzled with a simple dressing of oil, vinegar, salt, and mustard. Sometimes a dash of paprika or sugar was added to adjust the flavor, but the appeal was always in the freshness of the lettuce paired with the sharp tang of the dressing. Old cookbooks encouraged serving this salad at luncheons or as the first course at dinner because it added color and a touch of elegance without requiring more than 5 minutes of work. Families appreciated its lightness, especially during warmer months when heavy foods were less welcome. The recipe reflected the growing popularity of salads in mid-century cooking, when health and presentation were becoming more important. Boston lettuce with French dressing was quick, thrifty, and stylish all at once. Old-fashioned peach preserves were homemade jams made from fresh peaches, cooked down with sugar to capture the fruit's natural sweetness and preserve it for months. These preserves were a staple in many African-American households where seasonal fruit was canned to extend its enjoyment year-round. The process involved simmering peaches with sugar and sometimes spices like cinnamon or cloves, then sealing the mixture in sterilized jars. This technique was essential before refrigeration was common, allowing families to enjoy summer flavors during colder months. Old-fashioned peach preserves were often spread on biscuits, cornbread, or toast, adding a burst of sweetness to daily meals. Making preserves was also a communal activity, bringing families and neighbors together during harvest time. These jars of sunshine embodied tradition, resourcefulness, and the joy of home cooking. Today, they remain a nostalgic favorite that connects modern palates with the tastes and memories of the past. The peanut butter and banana sandwich was a sweet and savory classic that found a special place in many mid-century American homes. This simple creation combined creamy or crunchy peanut butter with fresh banana slices layered between 2 pieces of soft bread, creating a quick, satisfying meal or snack. Its appeal rested on the harmonious blend of the nutty richness from the peanut butter and the natural sweetness and creaminess of the banana. The sandwich was easy to prepare, required no cooking, and could be made in minutes, which made it ideal for busy families or children's lunches. It also offered a nutritious boost, providing protein, healthy fats, and potassium. Over time, this sandwich became a nostalgic comfort food for many, evoking memories of childhood and family kitchens. Its simplicity did not diminish its popularity, as it balanced taste and health better than many other snacks of the era. The peanut butter and banana sandwich exemplifies how basic ingredients combined thoughtfully can produce a timeless favorite that crosses generations. Apple and cheddar slices were a quick, satisfying pairing that showed up in countless cookbooks as both a snack and a light meal. Thick slices of crisp apple were arranged neatly on a plate with wedges of sharp cheddar cheese, making a dish that was colorful, flavorful, and ready in minutes. The sweet tart flavor of the apple balanced beautifully with the savory sharpness of the cheese, creating a combination that was both refreshing and filling. Homemakers liked this recipe because it required no cooking, which made it perfect for hot days or busy schedules. It was also considered fashionable in diet-conscious eras since it provided protein without the heaviness of bread or meat. Families often served it for lunch, picnics, or even as part of a supper tray. The simplicity was its greatest strength, reminding people that quick meals did not need to be complicated to be satisfying. Apple and cheddar slices were both thrifty and timeless, a pairing that felt just as much at home on a farmhouse table as it did at a luncheon. Sweet potato biscuits with honey butter combined fluffy, golden biscuits made with mashed sweet potatoes, and served warm with a drizzle of sweet honey-infused butter. This recipe added a sweet and savory twist to traditional biscuits, highlighting the natural sweetness of sweet potatoes and the richness of butter enhanced by honey. The biscuits were tender with a moist crumb, perfect for breakfast or as a side to savory dishes. Honey butter added a glossy sweetness that complemented the biscuit's flavor and texture beautifully. This dish reflected the creativity and resourcefulness of African American baking traditions, turning humble ingredients into special treats. Sweet potato biscuits with honey butter were often featured at family meals and celebrations, evoking a sense of comfort and indulgence. They remain a beloved classic that honors the rich agricultural and culinary heritage of the South, offering a delicious balance of flavors that delights all ages. Quick meatball subs provided an easy way for families to enjoy hearty, flavorful sandwiches without a long wait. These mini meatballs were made from ground beef or pork, seasoned and cooked rapidly, then nestled inside small buns or rolls. The meatballs were typically coated in a tomato-based sauce and topped with melted cheese, combining familiar tastes in a convenient handheld form. This recipe reflected the mid-century American preference for simple, filling meals that could satisfy hungry appetites quickly, especially on busy weeknights. Quick meatball subs became popular because they balanced comfort and speed, offering the richness of a meatball dinner with the portability of a sandwich. Often served at family dinners or casual gatherings, they appealed to both children and adults alike. Their widespread appeal stemmed from using accessible ingredients and straightforward cooking methods, making this dish a dependable part of many home cooks' repertoires. These sandwiches showcase how classic flavors were adapted to fit the lifestyle of post-war America. Egg custard cups made on the stovetop were one of those clever recipes that made dessert possible even without an oven. Cookbooks instructed homemakers to whisk together eggs, milk, sugar, and a splash of vanilla, then pour the mixture into small cups and set them in a double boiler to steam. In less than 15 minutes, the custards firmed into silky, sweet servings that could be enjoyed warm or chilled. This recipe was especially practical in summer when turning on the oven was unpleasant. Families loved the smooth, creamy texture, and the portion-sized cups made it easy to serve at gatherings or for children. Sometimes nutmeg was sprinkled on top for flavor and decoration. Egg custard cups embodied the thrift and resourcefulness of vintage kitchens, using simple ingredients to create a dish that felt indulgent without requiring extra cost. They were proof that even the humblest pantry could produce something elegant. In homes that valued both speed and tradition, custard cups were always welcome. Cornmeal mush cakes were a beloved Southern breakfast favorite made by shaping pan-fried cornmeal mush into crispy, golden cakes. The cornmeal mush was cooked and then sliced or scooped into patties before being fried until the outside turned crunchy, while the inside remained soft and tender. This simple dish provided a hearty start to the day and was often served with syrup, butter, or savory sides. Cornmeal mush cakes were popular in African American kitchens due to their affordability and filling nature. The recipe showcased the resourcefulness of cooks turning staple ingredients into satisfying meals. It was a versatile dish, enjoyed plain or dressed up with various toppings to suit individual tastes. Cornmeal mush cakes remain a nostalgic reminder of traditional Southern breakfasts and the deep culinary heritage of the region, offering comfort and flavor that spans generations. Cottage cheese and fruit bowls offered a light and wholesome dish that paired creamy, mild cottage cheese with a variety of seasonal fruits. This combination was celebrated for its balance of protein and natural sweetness, making it a favored choice for breakfast, snacks, or light lunches. The simplicity of this dish made it highly adaptable, as any fresh or canned fruits could be used, including berries, peaches, or pineapple. Mid-century cooks appreciated its nutritional benefits and the quick assembly it required, fitting well with busy lifestyles. The dish also provided a refreshing contrast in textures, with the softness of the cheese complemented by the juicy firmness of the fruit. Cottage cheese and fruit bowls reflected the era's growing interest in health-conscious meals that did not sacrifice taste or convenience. This classic pairing remains a nostalgic favorite, reminding many of the straightforward yet satisfying dishes of their youth. Which old-school survival recipe would you want in your kitchen when times get tough? Share your family's hard times wisdom in the comments below. Hit that like button and subscribe so you never miss more forgotten recipes worth knowing.